Two boys were riding on their bicycles, and they saw a dead body in the marsh. They called the police. The dead man was Chase Andrew, the best quarterback in town. The police examined the circumstances around his death. His body was directly below the opened grate on a fire tower, but there were no fingerprints on the railings nor footprints. His autopsy indicated that he died from hitting his head after falling from a great height. The doctor saw a red cloth among his things that wasn't part of his clothes, so the police took the cloth. At a bar in town, people talked about the death and were certain that the Marsh girl would have something to do with it. The police heard and went to search the girl's house. She lives in the marsh, and her house was filled with shells and feathers. The police found a red cloth, the same material as the one they found with Chase Andrew. Then they found the Marsh girl in her boat and pursued her. She tried to run away, but they caught her. A retired lawyer named Tom Milton volunteered to defend her in court, so he came to see her to know her better. She told him that she once had a family, and they called her Kia. Her mom adored her dearly. However, her father usually beat them for no reason, including their mom. One day, her mother went away with bruises on her face and never came back. Then the children started leaving soon after too. The closest to her, Jody, was the last to go. He told her that if she ever got into any trouble, she should run deep into the marsh. Then he bid her farewell and left. Kia learned from others and knew how to avoid the wrath of her father. She went to the sea in a boat but lost her way. Then she met Jody's friend, Tate, and he offered to take her home. She told her father that she was hungry, so he took her to a store in town where they bought little items. Kia was barefooted. The store owner's wife told her that they served lunch at school and encouraged her to attend and make friends. When she got to school, other children made fun of her and called her names, so she left and decided to learn from the wild instead. Her father was nice to her for a while. They went fishing together, and she did her chores quietly. He taught her not to trust anyone. One day, he gifted her a bag to collect all her feathers and shells. Then they got a mail from her mom. She was extremely happy, but her dad took the letter, and after reading it, he burnt it, telling Kia that her mom was never coming back. Kia was sad that she couldn't read the letter, so she packed the ashes and kept it. Her father burnt any trace of her mom remaining in the house, and one day, he left. She was a little girl, alone, and had to fend for herself. So she dug out mussels before dawn and took them to Mr. Jumpin's store in exchange for foodstuffs and gas. She asked Mr. Jumpin the quantity of mussels he'll need for a week and promised to supply him. His wife, Mrs. Mabel, pitied her and got some shoes and a dress for her from their church warehouse. At her hearing in court, the judge said Catherine Danielle Clark, Kia's full name, would be charged with death if she was found guilty. Her lawyer told her that the case was not looking good, but she had the option of a plea, and she'd be sentenced to 10 years imprisonment, but she could be out in 6 years. However, Kia does not want to admit to being guilty. When Kia was much older in 1962, someone dropped feathers for her close to her house. Kia could recognize birds by their feathers and loved to collect any stray ones she found. The person dropped her some plant seeds, a plug, and a letter one day. When she wanted to return the gesture, she realized it was Tate, her brother's friend. She told him she couldn't read his letter, so Tate offered to teach her how to read. She learned fast, and in no time, they began to read about birds, cells, and the organization of life. Kia still wondered why her mom would abandon her child. When Tate's father heard that he was hanging out with the Marsh girl, he warned him to remain focused on his dream to attend college. Social service workers began to look for Kia to take her to a support home because she was alone. So she stayed away from her house and covered her footprints on her way to avoid being tracked. Kia thanked Tate for all his help and asked about his family. He told her that his mom and little sister died in a car crash when they traveled to get him a bike for his birthday gift. Kia consoled him that it wasn't his fault. After they hung out for a while, they kissed, and she became his girlfriend. On her birthday, he bought her a cake and took her to a river where snow geese came for a swim. Kia was so happy, she didn't even know it was her birthday already because she doesn't have a calendar. After a while, they began to make out, but Tate didn't have sex with her because he didn't want to hurt her. Tate got admission to college and was planning to leave. Kia wrote books about the living creatures around her and drew them beautifully. One day, While Tate was going through her drawings, he told her about his admission and that he had to leave the following week because he had a job in the biology lab. Kia tried to convince him to stay behind, but he told her that he didn't want to become a shrimper like his father, and she didn't want to leave her house either. So she angrily walked away. Tate spent his last night in her house, and when he was about to leave, he gave her a list of publishers in town to submit her books to, so she wouldn't have to dig mussels for the rest of her life. Kia feared that he wouldn't return to her, so Tate promised that he'd be back in a month on the 4th of July, and they'd meet at the beach to watch the fireworks together. Kia got busy with her drawings, and when it was the 4th of July, she dressed up and went to the beach. She was there until the next morning, but Tate didn't show up. She was heartbroken, but she began to heal eventually. At her court hearing, the prosecutor was of the opinion that Chase's death was murder because all the traces of footprints and fingerprints were wiped away. Mr. Wilton presented the tide table for the night and morning of Chase's death. It showed that there was low tide around midnight and then the groundwater rose in the morning, which could wipe Chase's foot and fingerprints, including any of his friends, from the tower. This ruled out the fact that the absence of prints suggested a crime. He also presented the letter the sheriff submitted to the U.S. Forest Service the previous year about the grate of the tower, which was often left open. His letter indicated that it could cause severe injury or death. Kia met Chase at the beach after her issues with Tate. When she got home that day, she saw a man taking pictures of her house. Then she went to tell the Jumpins about it. They told her that the government was trying to renovate the marsh but she could save her house if she had the deeds to her house. On Kia's way back home, Chase asked her out for a picnic at the beach on Sunday, and she agreed. She also found out that her house was bought in her grandfather's name, but she had to pay the back taxes of $800 to claim ownership of the house. So she went home and took the list of publishers that Tate had given her 5 years ago. She wrote to some of them and sent samples of her drawings. During her picnic with Chase, he found a shell, and she told him it was an ornate scallop, rare to find around. Chase was impressed and tried to initiate intimacy, but Kia got angry and got up to leave. Chase apologized, and they went to the fire tower. She was glad to see all of the marsh from the top. Chase took her home and offered to be her friend until she wanted more. He only associated with her in the marsh, not in public, but she was content that she wasn't alone anymore. The prosecutor presented the red material found on Chase's body and the red scarf they found in Kia's house in court. It was tested, and they matched each other. Kia and Chase began to date. She got feedback from one of the publishers, and they were willing to publish her books. Chase also got promoted as a manager. He promised her that he was going to marry her and get her a nice house. Chase was going to town to get a few things for his father's store, and he was going to be there for 2 days, so he took Kia with him. They had an intimate moment in the hotel, and he promised not to leave her like everyone she knew. She tied the ornate scallop shell they found on their first date to a red woolen piece of cloth and gave it to him as a necklace. Chase's mom testified in court that there was a shell necklace that her son usually wore all the time, but it was not on his body after death. She knew it was Kia that gave it to him, and she had told her son to break up with her. So she believed that Kia killed him and took her necklace from him when he broke up with her. Back to when Chase was still dating Kia, they were hanging out on the river when Tate came back. He saw them and left. Then he heard Chase bragging about Kia's abilities to his friends one day, and he got angry and went at Chase. Mr. Jumpin had to separate them that day. Kia heard a ship engine shut in front of her house. She ran out and saw Tate. She was so angry and began to throw stones at him. He begged her to listen to him and told her that Chase wasn't good for her. She retorted that he was the one that left her for years without saying a word nor sending a letter to explain what happened. He apologized to her and begged to have her back into his life, but Kia refused. Kia ran into Chase in town. She told him she had good news from the publisher and invited him to celebrate with her. But just as they were talking, his family came by, and a lady among them introduced herself as Chase's fiancée, and Chase didn't deny it. When she got home, she was pained and cried. Then she heard Chase arrive at her house, so she ran out and hid in the bush. Chase called out for her and angrily threw things around when she didn't respond. The publisher sent her a check for her books with the promise of royalties, some copies of her printed book, and invited her to a conference in Greenville next month. Kia paid the back taxes, bought furniture and household materials for the house. Jody came to the house to see her. He was now a military officer. He told her that he saw her book and came to check if she still lived in the house. He also told her that their mom was dead. She tried to get custody of her, but she wasn't able to save enough money for a lawyer before she took ill with leukemia and died. Jody promised to check on her from time to time. Kia gifted a copy of her book to Tate and gave it to Mr. Jumpin to deliver. When she was about to leave, Chase entered the store with his friends. He wanted to talk to her, but she didn't want to listen and left. Chase found her in the woods while she was drawing. She didn't want to see him. She told him he was heartless for dating her while engaged to another woman. He replied that he had no choice but needed her in his life. Kia didn't want to hear any of it and was about to leave when Chase punched her and attempted assault. She took a stone, hit his head, got up, kicked him continuously, and threatened to kill him if he tried to hurt her again. A man on a nearby boat heard her and testified in court when Chase died. After the incident with Chase in the woods, she couldn't stay in the house in fear of what Chase might do. Then she understood why her mom left. While hiding in the bush close to her house one day, Tate came to check on her because Mr. Jumpin was worried. He saw the black patch around Kia's eyes and was concerned, but she told him to stay out of it. She informed him about her meeting in Greenville, and he encouraged her to get bus schedules from Mr. Jumpin and go. When she went to get the bus schedules, he advised her to report Chase, but she explained that Chase would have more advantage since his parents were rich. She promised Mr. Jumpin that she'd come to see him when she returns. A woman who owns a store close to the bus station testified to seeing Kia board the 9 a.m. bus and leave Barkley Cove on October 29. The publisher she attended the conference with in Greenville also testified to being with her for hours that same night. Then the defendant suggested that Kia could have come back on the 1:30 a.m. bus and gone back to Greenville on the 2:30 a.m. bus since she didn't stay in the same hotel as her publishers, and the hotel she lodged in was the closest to the bus station. Mr. Wilton gave his final word to the jury. He told them that Kia had been misjudged all her life by her community members except for the Jumpins. He pleaded with them that since it was proven that Kia was not in Barkley Cove on the night of Chase's death, they should judge the case fairly and be true to Kia. After 6 hours of waiting for the final judgment by the jury, everyone was called inside, and the judgment was about to be proclaimed. The court proclaimed Miss Catherine Danielle Clark innocent of the death of Chase Andrew. She was delighted and thanked her lawyer, Tom Milton. She also thanked the Jumpins, Tate and his dad, and told Jody to take her home. She was happy to be back in her own space with her paintings. She made up with Tate, and he asked her to marry him. Jody had a wife and children also, and they came visiting from time to time. Kia wrote many more books, and they were published. Mr. Jumpin grew old and died. Tate and Kia also lived happily and grew old together. Kia died silently in her boat one day, and some of her exhibits were moved to a university lab. Old Tate was going through one of her books and saw the necklace she gave Chase hidden in the book. Chase was a predator in Kia's life, and she took him down before he could harm her. Tate was shocked, but he threw the shell into the river. If you would like to watch the full movie, the title is Where the Crawdads Sing. Please don't forget to subscribe as this encourages us to make more videos daily. It also helps with the YouTube algorithm. Please, like, share and subscribe. We love you and we'll see you in the next video.